your screen to zoom in on a specific screen so you can follow along. At the end of our session, we would be very grateful if you could share your feedback on the iLRN2020.sched.com's website. You should have received the link. Thank you. So first, let me introduce our first presenter for today. Matt Cook is the Digital Scholarship Program Manager for Harvard Library. As an educational technologist, Matt has overseen the implementation of multiple award-winning maker spaces and visualization facilities and earned Campus Technology Innovator, Education Futurist, and Library Journal Mover and Shaker Award. Matt's research centers on spatial cognition, and he has spoken and published widely on associated topics, including mindfulness in the workplace, library technology ethics, and R&D management. Today, Matt will be talking about immersive design, concept to 3D print workflows using VR-based modeling software. Matt, take it away.
Thank you very much, Letitia. I appreciate that kind introduction, and thank you everyone for being here. I'm just going to jet through some high-level points from the video and the slides that you may have seen. Basically, what I'm talking about today is a workflow for taking ideas and making them into physical objects using a combination of virtual reality and 3D printing. There's good news and bad news about this workflow. The bad news is, at least right now, a lot of the software and the hardware associated with this specific implementation is proprietary, which is to say you'll have to buy some stuff and perhaps subscribe to some software platforms if you want to do exactly what we've done at Harvard Library. That's the bad news. The good news is that, at least in the world of academic libraries and universities, both virtual reality and 3D printing are becoming relatively common. So there's a good chance, depending on where you're at, that you may already have access to these tools, and they're coming down in price as well. This is sort of the second piece of good news. So the core hardware components that we rely on for this workflow are the Oculus Quests, which is relatively new still, but the price is right, and Prusa printers, again, the price is right for those. So you can get a Quest, I think it's the 64 gig memory model, and a Prusa printer, and essentially replicate this workflow for about $800. So for under $1,000, you can deploy a rapid prototyping station in your home or your office or your library or your lab. And sort of the most important thing is that you don't have to be a technical user, or your constituency don't have to be technical users to benefit from the deployment of that workstation. That's sort of the big takeaway here. I come from the humanities, and I wasn't able to access, as an undergrad or a grad student, sort of these technologies easily, nor was I trained in CAD. But if you use VR to do your CAD work and you export these models to a 3D print queue, you can really go from a concept to a prototype pretty quickly without any formal training. In terms of examples, and the image you can see on the slide on the right, I like to start with a base model or a reference image. In this case, I used a selection of chairs imported as references to Gravity Sketch from Sketchfab. I can walk through the entire workflow and the tech specifics during the Q&A, but basically, using a reference image of a set of famous historic chairs, I was able to craft what I call here the elephant chair, which essentially reflects the reach and range of my arms and legs by doing this work in virtual reality. So I wanted to make a chair, and I wanted to make a chair that was specific to my body. So I used Gravity Sketch and some reference images from Sketchfab to model the image you see on the right, and then 3D print it. I could also sit virtually in that chair using a physical chair surrogate in my crafting environment, which is kind of cool. And then when all is said and done, I can export it, in this case, again, from Gravity Sketch to our 3D print queue, which is Maker Fleet, in this case at Harvard Library, and then I can remotely submit that model for 3D printing in our science library. So I could potentially do this entire workflow from home and then go pick up my model if campus was open right now, which it is not. The beauty here is, again, non-technical people can benefit. You can do it on the cheap, and all the tools are available today. It's just a matter of sort of figuring out the throughput, the file types, and putting all the pieces together. So I'm looking forward to answering more questions and going into more depth during the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. So let me check the chat right now so we didn't get any questions. I was wondering, since we don't have a huge crowd, that maybe if people want to ask questions from the floor, I can unmute you. People are also free to raise their hands. So Jacob.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I've actually been investigating the mobile 3D modeling and the workflow of getting that to a printer recently. And one of the problems I found is that actually preparing the 3D model for the printer, which is the process called slicing for anyone who isn't aware of that already, still requires a computer. Like I couldn't do it all on my iPad, or like the Oculus Quest doesn't have a slicer that I know of. Do you have any solutions for that to kind of streamline that workflow?
I wish I did. I think as you allude to, the Oculus Quest in terms of like file management, even just like basic operating system operations is super limited. So you're not going to do any model prep necessarily in the headset, and nor does this specific workflow require it. It's very much sort of like there's a desktop step in between outputting your model and then submitting to a print queue. Now, the good thing about the tools that I'm talking about specifically here in MakerFleet in particular is it's built-in slicing and it's web-based. So you actually don't need to do an intermediary slicing step. You can go from, I believe the standard output for Gravity Sketch in this case is OBJ, and you can upload that file directly to MakerFleet. It'll slice on the fly on the web, and then you can immediately send it to the print queue. So it just depends on how many steps you want to take, but you're definitely going to need a desktop interface at some point.
Thank you.
I believe Robert had a question, but similar question, because I think he said that you already answered that. Anyone else?
Hi, this is Chris Hoffman from Berkeley. Thank you. I have a question. As you think right now during the pandemic, how are you thinking about offering these services, or some even subset of these services, to students in the fall?
That's a great question. I've been thinking about it a lot. I think it's probably less likely that we'll do scaled 3D printing, just given the sort of nature of physical objects and touching in the fall, or that perhaps won't be our focus. But I've been spending a lot of time in these sort of online community spaces like the one we're in now, but also Mozilla hubs. So Sketchfab is like pretty essential in terms of hosting for the content that I'm creating and the content that I'm deploying in sort of classroom settings. So I can imagine, even if we didn't go to the final step, which is 3D printing, if we did modeling in Gravity Sketch on the Quest, those models could be deployed and shared perhaps here, is it VirBELA, or on a platform like Mozilla Hubs, which has Sketchfab integration out of the box. So we could do like some sort of design-oriented architecture class or sculpture class where if people had access to headsets, and there's some talk of distributing headsets to a limited number of students, faculty, or staff in the fall. So that's the other issue. If you want to support any part of the workflow, we're going to have to provide access to headset hardware. The good thing about the Quest, of course, is it doesn't require a PC. So if we had, campus-wide license to Gravity Sketch and the ability to send out a limited number of Quests, and then a platform like Mozilla Hubs, we could have many of the same benefits as part of a remote workflow, remote instruction.
Hi
That's
there.
pretty exciting.
Oh, sorry. I've got a question regarding how you interact with the objects, specifically how you can orientate them in the virtual space. So do you use some kind of grab mechanic or a widget-based approach to orientate these objects so you can see the parts you want to be working on? Or is it a bit of a blend of both?
Go ahead. Oh yeah, absolutely. So Actually, my preferred software for modeling in VR is Medium, which I believe is an Autodesk, a recent Autodesk acquisition. But in any case, as far as I know, that is tethered software, which means, unlike me, you'll have to use a PC with a graphics card to get those range of benefits. They're great on orienting and grabbing and extruding and subtracting material. Gravity Sketch is sort of like my standard for mobile VR or untethered VR. They have a lot of the same orientation controls, like what you mentioned. You can grab and rotate with one hand in real time, and you can scale with two hands in real time, and it's pretty darn responsive. So I haven't noticed any performance issues with those mechanics, and the interaction itself is like you described. It's a grab. I believe it's a grip grab. So if you're using a Quest controller, it'd be the inside grip, one hand, probably right hand grab. I don't have it in front of me right now. Grab the object to rotate in front of you, and then two hand to grab and spread your arms to scale the object. So it's a super intuitive sort of interface mechanism, and it doesn't take a lot of training, unlike learning Autodesk or Revit or SketchUp. You're gonna spend hours learning basic controls like pan and orientation in those softwares. Not the case either with Gravity Sketch or Medium.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so I've not really used any of those. I'm just starting to get into those. I own some 3D printers, so I was very interested in that. So you definitely prefer the more natural style of interactions rather than widget-based approaches?
Yeah, absolutely. The problem that I noticed early on is that I couldn't get the straight line sort of lock that I needed to do like very, very precise work. Like if I wanted to do something that was going to be printed and then ultimately require the use of, say, like bolts and screws and external hardware, like secondary components, that's tricky, because then you're basically relying on your eye to achieve the sort of proportions and measurements that are like standard metric or other scales. So you're going to need some sort of like grid system. Now, both Medium and Gravity Sketch, to my knowledge, have those grid systems where you can lock in a straight line. So they're getting better about doing sort of this like more engineering oriented applications. But in terms of this, the image, again, the slide image, the sort of creative applications, the sculpture and the performative brushwork, that is already very much in place. So as like an artist, I think I would say you're good to go. As an engineer, I would kind of look for this as like your rough draft in terms of modeling.
Okay, that's cool. I think I'm facing a similar issue. I do mind mapping in virtual reality, developing the software, and I think I've hit the same issues you have. So it's great for large range of movements, but when you start to get into more granular, fine detail work, your natural interactions, the fidelity of your natural hand movements isn't enough or accurate enough, and then you kind of have to flip back to, say, widget-based or tool icons and things like that. Okay,
Absolutely.
thanks. That was very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Do we have any other questions? You can raise your hand or just and ask. So was there someone else that had said, no, Robert, you were the one that said that you just got a printer. Yeah. Well, Matt, I was wondering if you could give us some other examples of things that you and the students at Harvard have just created. Was the 3D printer?
Absolutely, yeah. My other favorite example, and this may have come through in the video, is the instructional chess set, where you have essentially a remix project, so you can pull in traditional chess pieces, say off of a platform like Sketchfab, and then remix them in virtual reality. In this case, the goal was to add the movements of each piece to the piece, so younger players could understand the rules of the game and learn the moves easier. So if you go on Sketchfab, I think on the first and last slide here, I believe my personal website is linked. If not, it's on my profile on the website. In any case, you can click through and you can find me on Sketchfab, and all those pieces are downloadable and printable. So there's some like marketable applications for some of this. And you don't have to start from scratch. I think that's super important. I'm not like a visual artist. You can use reference material that's already out there. You can use models and add material to them. You know, like a chess set is a pretty standard model that's floating around. If you want to do a custom chess set, you can really easily do something like that.
I apologize, I was frozen for a minute. Let me see, any other questions? Sad, we have more questions coming, so I'm sorry if you cannot hear the speaker. Let me see, this will be recorded and it was streaming live on YouTube, so that might be a better way maybe to follow along.
Can you hear me now? Okay, good. Yes, we do have a regular workshop that's based on the topic of this this talk, and I can find the link. I'm sure we have it generally a couple times a semester, and it's been, I'm happy to say, a full house, you know, in the times that we've taught it, and it seems to appeal to a wide range of users, including the humanities folks that I mentioned. So I'll find that link and post like the actual event. It's very similar to what you've seen today. Just I spoke for a little longer than 3 minutes, so it'll be like a version, like the video version, kind of extended. And then we actually do bring the quest to the class, so every participant, it's like 20 people max, has access to a quest. One thing that I've found since I've been at Harvard, and I haven't been there very long, is that the resources just this last year in terms of the acquisition of headset hardware through grants has been fantastic. So we have something like 50 quests available for checkout in our science library, and it's, I believe, a 2-day circulation period, which is fantastic. So if you like what you see in the workshop with this content, you can take a quest home and do the work.
That sounds pretty amazing. I don't think my university has the same resources.
We didn't have these until recently, and where I was before, we didn't have it either. But I think with the cost of the Quest, it'll become more and more common, and you know, future headsets, you can package it all up in a box, which is super convenient. There are.
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry. There are labs on campus that offer 3D. The library, I would say, is the most sort of discipline agnostic, and for that reason, I feel that it is incumbent upon us to sort of support 3D across disciplines. In many cases, you have a lab, for example, that will support a specific department, and it may only support people at the graduate or faculty level. But to be able to provide equipment in a democratic fashion for departments, like I keep coming back to the humanities, they may or may not have the resources or the sort of technical expertise to support 3D or VR. But that doesn't mean that their students in particular couldn't benefit from access. So I think the library has a really important role to play here. So we do circulate headset hardware from one library, but that anyone with affiliation can go there and access it, which I think is super valuable. And there are leading researchers and labs doing this work around campus, but they're not necessarily open to the wider community.
I have a couple more minutes for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. Matt, I was going to ask if you could post that link, so it's in the chat box.
Yeah, I'm going to try to post a couple things here. This is the second link is going to be a different VR lab on campus that I work with regularly, so people can get a feel for the variety of work going on. But I'll try to find this lib event guide or lib event for the original workshop.
Well, Matt, thank you so much for this presentation.
Yeah,
Give him
thank
a
you.
round of applause. I'm not sure if we can all find the F4 function. Great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you.
So moving on to our second presentation. So Dr. Paula MacDowell is an assistant professor of educational technology and design at the University of Saskatchewan. She works closely with teachers to integrate XR in their classrooms to enhance learner engagement, empowerment, inclusion, and ingenuity. She studies the design of immersive learning experiences for pro-social and environmental change. Sarah Cassidy is an undergraduate student at the university and currently an undergraduate research assistant for Dr. MacDowell. She's entering her last term before completing her Bachelor's of Education in Secondary Education program. She has a keen interest in educational technology and how it can be used to amplify student voices and create positive change. Their presentation today is titled How Students Achieve Learning Objectives by Designing AR Experiences.
Okay, hello everyone. So as Letitia said earlier, my name is Sarah Cassidy, and this past year, I had the opportunity to design an augmented reality experience through my EdTech course taught by Dr. MacDowell. And as a student, as well as a teacher candidate, I was and I continue to be captured by how designing these AR experiences in the classroom can create opportunities for students to achieve learning objectives in a personal and meaningful way. So, for example, early on in the design process, students are engaging in enjoyable and meaningful inquiry around ed tech. So the design process begins with students choosing a keyword associated with educational technology, so such as VR, creative coding, among some other examples. And so the inquiry process is present not only when students are choosing an area of focus, but also while students are exploring how to navigate the program to create these experiences. So the example above shows a project created by myself and my partner, Jaden Smith, who is also a USask undergrad education student. So we chose to focus our experience on digital storytelling. So after choosing that keyword, we created the tracking image that you see and then generated a code which would launch our AR experience, which outlined the components of digital storytelling through guiding the viewer through a story about a lost cat. As well, students are knowledge creators. So when you're creating digital stories in AR, I found that I was representing my knowledge in a more holistic way because I had to go beyond the more traditional or maybe one-dimensional format of just writing a paper, and I was creating an experience which layered art and stories and music and more. As well, this project really it generates like student ownership and pride in coursework. So the AR design project is student directed, which allows for a considerable amount of creative freedom for students as they get to decide how they'll focus and represent their projects. And then in addition to the sense of ownership, students can design their experiences in a way which represents their unique interests and style. And this assignment is accessible for students who had no prior experience with AR to create projects which they're really proud of. And finally, collective cognitive responsibility. Through their role as knowledge creators, students take on responsibility for their own learning as well as the learning for their peers. So this model of collective cognitive responsibility creates space for students to contribute to curriculum in a way which is relevant and meaningful to themselves and to their peers. And these are just a few of many examples. As a student and a teacher candidate myself, I'm personally excited for the opportunity that this design project creates for achieving these learning objectives while also amplifying student voices. Because this platform creates really unique opportunities for students to share their stories and educate about specific issues and advocate for positive change in a really new and I think really powerful way. And when students are given a platform to share their own knowledge and their own experiences, I think we all benefit from that experience to grow an understanding of each other and also in ourselves.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you.
Do you want to move to our fun activity now, or do you want to take questions?
Maybe we'll take questions, which is to say that we actually do have a little activity on the session on learners as makers and creators. We thought that we needed to try something. But if you have any questions, we would like to answer those.
All right, so we have questions in the chat box. What platform program do you have students use?
The platform we've been using, it's called ZapWorks, and you can look for the free app called Zapper. And I've found this one. The reason I chose this one, I mean, there are others that are great to use as well, is that students can actually sign up for their own account and have a free code to use. So if you don't have a budget to actually buy the software, then that's always an option. But the software itself is very scalable, so it has a low barrier for learners who have limited knowledge, and then it has also a very high ceiling. You can do very advanced 3D modeling within this app, so that's why I chose it, and it's called ZapWorks.
And Paula, would you be, oh, someone is already on it and posted the links. Thank you. All right, so it looks like a few people have also used the program before. So another question for you, how does student-generated content contribute to the course objectives and outcomes?
Sure, in many ways, the student-generated content, I would say the most important for me is that it makes EdTech keywords come to life in my classroom, which is very important to me because the courses I teach are in educational technology and learning design. And we have no shortage of challenging, complex, and dynamic terms that we need to be familiar with, and I want my students to understand. So this allows for students to really use their imagination and their inquiry skills to come up with experiences around the EdTech keywords that we need to learn. And that sense of community is also very important because students are, we generate a sense of belonging in the course, and this is important to me for making more access to student diversity and voice. And it kind of equals out. So students that have high tech skills, they serve as mentors to others. Students who are really artistic or musical, they contribute to other projects, and it works really well to create a classroom community, which I love because students are really motivated to come to class, and I am just always continually inspired by the work that they are doing. And yes, so those would be some of the reasons. But the other thing too that's just really important is the sense of design and the sense of actually being a creator and having an opportunity to really contribute your own voice to the class. And I'm seeing a few other questions down here. So let's see where we're at.
Paula, someone was asking about the program, if it's only free for 30 days. You know?
Yeah, so that's the trial that is free for 30 days. And from my experience, is the accounts don't expire after 30 days, although I would not rely on that. But I've been doing ZapWorks projects for over 3 years now, and the accounts are still active. Because I use this in so many of my courses, and I just really love the app, and I love the synergy and the creativity and inspiration that it brings. I actually I pay for the educator's account, and I think it's about $300 a year. And I have a budget, so I'm able to purchase this. So I also have all the students' work archived. So there is a guaranteed backup, so no student work ever will get lost. I can look through and see all their coding. So I have access to that. So that's another option if you wanted to actually buy the educator's account. And just to address this question, how do you envision similar activities in a secondary classroom? So the majority of my students are actually teachers, and I also teach in the grad programs, and many of the students in the grad programs are teachers as well. And they bring these activities back into their classrooms and it's just a joy to see the work that students do. If you want some examples, you can feel free to contact me. I won't share them here now, but I do have just excellent examples of teachers that have taken it back into their own classrooms and have challenged their students to work on projects. And if anything, I found that some of the high school students will work on their projects for a very long time and just create really brilliant projects. One that comes to mind is a project on the immune system, and it's learning about blood cells, and it's just it's a phenomenal project.
Also, when I look at another question asking about using this design project for STEM courses, also reminds me of one of my classmates when I was working on these AR experiences, who's also a master's student and educator. Janelle is here, and that makes me think of, she made an amazing AR design project that was all about different types of cells, and you could choose what kind of type of cell you were looking at. You could click on it, it would bring up all of the different components and names and terms. So yeah, I think there's a lot of flexibility for different grades and subject areas.
Could you tell us more about the affordances and constraints of using AR?
Definitely pros and cons to everything in ed tech. I guess one of the constraints is that you need access to the internet, you need devices. In my classroom, because I teach university students, generally speaking, everybody has access to the internet and everybody has devices. So they're not particular constraints that I come up against, but they would be constraints in other settings. And the other constraint that I find is good design takes time. So you can't rush the process and expect great results. If you are the educator, you need to really be a champion of good design and to have good processes. So that means to have drafts, prototypes, peer reviews, check-ins, and all the really open and collaborative and synergistic. We're all on the same team and can support each other. But the good results they take time. And so you can't rush this project. If you do, you'll just have people who are overwhelmed and confused. So the more time and design process you can add into the project, it will be better. And on the plus side, I think I spoke to some of this before, it just really adds a lot of meaningful inquiry, joy to the classroom. Students get the opportunity to be makers, creators, and coders of the media and technology that make our world. And I will add that this particular assignment has really good results, but it isn't just about this particular tool or technique. It really is about the freedom that we have to make and create, and whether it's an AR code or your own unique point of view, it just is really empowering to be in settings where students are really just championed as makers and creators.
And I think when what makes me think of when we talk about how design takes time, good design takes time, and it's intentional, I found, reflecting on my own experience engaging with this project, that it really does encourage a mindful design process. I think when we think of the like important components of mindfulness and paying attention and having a clear intention and a positive attitude. All of those things I experienced over the course of completing this project, because when you're creating an AR experience, you are engaging with so many different types of literacies, right? And you're layering them, and you have to go in with a really kind of clear intention of what themes you want to communicate and what moods you want to convey. And you also have to take on a beginner's mindset. Yeah.
So we have a couple more questions in the chat. Do you have a reference that describes what you describe as design process?
So we use a hybrid kind of a design process. IDEO has some great materials for teachers. And again, because I work for teachers, so we reference those quite a bit. And something that I personally like to reinforce is a sustainable design process where we're very keen of where we put the waste, and waste just not in terms of materials, but in terms of our time and in terms of our energy into things. So we also use, I don't know if you're familiar with Nigel Cross's work on designerly ways of thinking and designerly ways of knowing. That's really important too, to get in the mindset of actually being a designer and what that means. And again, because I work with teachers, this is also, we use a lot of instructional design. So therein we're using instructional, yes, IDEO for teachers. That's great. Thanks for adding that in, Jem. So design also, it's a big word, because we're also looking at the design of the AR keyword to be a learning experience. So therein, that brings in user experience, it brings in the user interface, it brings on how to make it engaging. So this is where we do a lot of user testing with peers and learn how to be good designers and get feedback and make our work better. And
Paula,
I see it.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I see another question here about students creating the AR experiences, or do they create the 3D content as well? So what I really like about this particular platform is how it is very low barrier. So everybody can create something. And I actually have an 8-year-old son. I get him to do some projects as well, which are obviously very simple compared to what a graduate student is going to create. But it's very low barrier entry kind of the experience, and putting things together so that you can get an experience of what a course keyword means. So for instance, what are dark patterns? What is fake news? What is digital literacy? What is digital activism? Those are some of our keywords, and to design an experience around. And then on the tech side, students can make something that is more similar to a PowerPoint in terms of the level of tech skills, or it can actually be very advanced 3D modeling. Sometimes I have students who are very advanced in computer science, and they scale up and do just mind-blowing projects. And I have other students who do not have as advanced tech skills, and they do mind-blowing projects because they are just great designers and put really good pedagogy into their projects. I'm seeing now you need to try and zap some of the projects to actually get to try some of the games that are embedded, and to try some of the quizzes and the learning experiences. But there is a wide range for everybody to be challenged and also to be encouraged.
So we have a few links in the chat box as well.
Thanks. Yeah, these are all great resources.
design thinking for K-12. That's great. So what are your future plans for the AR project?
Future plans is to build on the success and learning and the AR pedagogy processes that I've developed, and actually I'm going to challenge students to create new AR keywords around the sustainable development goals so that they can create either definitions or stories or interpretations of how we can actually come together and work on the United Nations SDGs. So that's what's coming next. And I will add, in addition, from building on this AR project, which is a really good project to empower all students as being learners and creators in the immersive space. And then I do want to scale up with building virtual worlds around the SDGs. But it is important to also meet learners where they're at. And if you have students who don't have a lot of experience, then it's good to start with a project that they'll be successful and then level up to another more challenging and complex project.
We have time for a few more questions. Let me see, Sandy. Yes, thank you. So we have a few minutes that we could use for the fun activity. Paula, do you want to go ahead and?
Sounds good. Okay, so we thought we wanted to try to make something with you, and are not really having a lot of options for what we can make in a few minutes in VirBELA. So we thought we would make some fun, and we are going to challenge everyone. Let's see if our slide is up. Let's have our next slide. There we go. So here we have this is going to be our epic dance challenge. And our epic dance challenge. So some of you may be aware that VirBELA has a long list of different emotes that your character can dance in the audience. So what we want to try to do is to get everybody dancing all at the same time. So you can see the commands up on their screen. And what we want you to do is in your chat box, so don't press enter, but type / your choice, /dance, /dance2, or /samba. And actually, if anyone wants to come up on the stage, you're free to come up on the stage, or you can stay where you're at. It's up to you. Be nice to have a couple people come join us up on the stage. Don't be shy. Come on up. And what we want to do is to see how many we can get all dancing at the same time. Okay, so we've got a few up. Some are practicing. Okay, so now everyone's kind of got to practice. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to do a count of like 3, 2, 1, and then press your enter. So get a dance queued up in the chat. Okay, let's get a dance queued up in the chat. And hang on, I have to get mine queued up. Okay, so 3, 2, 1, go. I'm seeing a few people flip. There's also a /flip if you want to try the flip command.
We're all getting a good workout.
I saw someone say, can you imagine doing this in a real conference? I also wish I could do this in real life. I miss going out and dancing.
So I added in the chat a list of VirBELA emotes if you want to see what some of the other emotes are in there also. Can we dance on the tables?
Let me see if I can change to larger tables, maybe. Everybody has to stand up now. I don't think we can get on them. That was so great. All right, that sounds good. Yes, there are some other presentations that are starting in a couple of minutes, so we are going to wrap up. Thank you so much, Matt, Paula, and Sarah. Don't forget to submit your feedback on the SCET website. Yes, thank you. A round of applause. Thank you so much.
Thank
I think
you.
Elaine said that there is the instruction and instructional design presentation starting in a couple of minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.